Boteco 4.0, o podcast da ABII que explora a cozinha da transformação digital. Afinal de contas, a vida como ela é está longe de ser a dos vídeos institucionais e pitches. Sou Claudio Goldbach, o moderador nada moderado dessa aventura.
O que é umati e o que isso tem a ver com o UPC-UA? As linhas de produção atuais fazem parte da transformação digital da indústria? O Digital Twin é somente para simulação? Já ouviu falar em Metaverso industrial? E finalmente, como o Gaia-X se conecta a tudo isso? No episódio de hoje, que tem convidados internacionais e foi gravado em inglês, você vai conhecer tendências e entender o que o mundo está discutindo a respeito de normas e padronizações de tecnologia. Os convidados são Erich Barnstedt, representante da Microsoft Azure IoT em consórcios e associações de padronizações, e Andreas Faath, diretor do Departamento de Interoperabilidade de Informações de Máquinas da VDMA.
Yeah, guys. So now we are in the Pub 4.0 is the first edition of this podcast that is in English, because we have here Erich and Andreas. So Erich, tell the audience what is digital twin and why should we care about this digital twin thing?
Yeah, so digital twin actually started in the 60s and 70s with the Apollo space program, where they tried to build a digital representation of a physical asset, in this case, spacecraft. So really a digital twin is used for different purposes. NASA used it for simulation, but you can use it also for operational data or for building 3D wireframe models for either for viewing or for placing things in an environment, a digital environment. So there's no really one definition of a digital twin. There are many, and the trick is to understand that all digital twins have their purpose, and one is not better than another, right? They're all valid and they all have their purpose for different things, and it's just important to realize that more than likely when you're building these digital representations of physical assets, you're going to need more than one digital twin to get the job done, right? So a good example, for example, is UPC-UA for creating a digital twin for the operational aspects of a physical asset. In the UPC-UA realm, is usually a machine of some description. Another example for digital twin, which is quite popular, is a 3D wireframe representation of a physical thing for 3D modeling and placing in virtual environments, with textures and everything. Another great example for a digital twin is a simulation, right? The simulation could look like nothing like the physical asset looks like, but it's still, as long as you can simulate its behavior, then it's a totally valid digital twin, right? So the key point is there's many different digital twins. There's not one, and the trick is to pick the right digital twin to get the job done.
Great. And Andreas, and what is umati and why should Brazilians care about it?
Well, at first, umati is not a new technology. Everything we do on the umati initiative is based on the UPC-UA technology. Erich already mentioned this technology. And in addition, the companion specifications, so the standardized description of information that we should be exchanged by the machines, by the components during their use. So what is umati then? umati is an initiative to bring that into adoption. So we are trying to take this UPC-UA technology and the companion specifications that also have the name Global Production Language into adoption by a strong community, by initiative, where we are doing a demonstrator to show to give the companies the possibility to show their implementations and to have a worldwide acceptance of this UPC-UA technology together with this Global Production Language. So if we put it in a nutshell, it is really the add-on community and initiative to the technology to enable, for example, small and medium-sized companies to not be overwhelmed by the features and possibilities, but to make it easy and seamlessly to use this technology and the global production language, and that we really make it a de facto standard worldwide in every shop floor.
And the big advantage of the umati concept, and you guys are building up over the UPC-UA, right? Which is a protocol that is already used. Don't you think that?
Well, I think it's more than a protocol. UPC-UA really is a framework for modeling industrial assets. So in a way, it's also, I mean, it fits the definition of a digital twin. It also has a communication layer, right? And you can use different protocols with that communication layer. So it's actually protocol independent. You can put your own protocol underneath it if you want to. But really, the big benefit, there's really three benefits of UPC-UA. One is its interoperability, and of course, the fact that it's an IEC standard, and the fact that lots of people are using it, worldwide is really the preferred standard for modeling industrial assets now. That's a big benefit. The fact that the information model or data model can be extended, just like what umati is doing, that's a massive benefit. And the last one is definitely security, right? So it's the most secure information exchange technology in the industrial space that I'm at least aware of, right? I mean, it has an extensible security model as well, and has security standards become weaker because technology improves and hackers can break them brute force. They can be modified and new security patterns introduced without having to change the standard, right? Andreas?
Yeah, I totally agree on that. I would add that it is scalable from the shop floor up to the cloud, and that is international accepted. Because those three that you mentioned, Eric, and those two, that's exactly where I would say the requirements we had about 5 to 6, 7 years ago, where we were looking on which technology we will build up on the global production language with the semantic standards that are now brought to the world with the umati initiative. And exactly, UPC-UA fit those requirements, and this is why we took UPC-UA as the technology where we will build up on our activities, defining the semantics for so many different machines and so many different domains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's my point of view. That UPC-UA is building from bottom up. In other technologies, or not technologies but concepts, are trying to build top down. Right, so from a concept to something like a physical device, but UPC-UA use the advantage of being well used and building from bottom up. Don't you think that is a good definition for this concept?
Yeah, it certainly started in the shop floor, like in the OT world, and has been extended recently into the IT world. So in a way that's true. I would say it was always a relatively high level technology stack. So it's application level, right? So if you remember your ISO OSI networking stack, but it really had high level, very detailed data modeling capabilities from the start, right? So a lot of other standards, when you say they were built from the bottom up, it's they start with bits and bytes and reading and writing registers, and they build on top of that. UPC-UA wasn't started like that. It was really, well, it came from the OPC-DA and HA world, so what's now known as OPC Classic, which is already higher level because it was trying to consolidate all the proprietary PLC interfaces out there for shop floor communication, but it was always kind of relatively high level to start with, I would say. Okay. It was extended more recently with field level communication as well, so it's kind of started kind of in the middle and has grown up to the cloud and down to the field, versus some other standards have really, started with bits and bytes and then became more abstract all the time. So I would say not really. It's more kind of higher level and started kind of in the middle of the industrial automation pyramid and then has grown in both directions.
So I just changed my perspective now. It's from medium up instead of from bottom up. So yeah. But on the other hand, I'm just mentioned bottom up from start from OT instead of
for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think OT was already there, and then just connecting to the cloud.
Yeah,
okay.
Right. Exactly.
And Erich, tell me, you just mentioned in the first answer, you mentioned that digital twin is a physical representation of, for instance, a machine. And then we have this statement that avatar is a digital representation of a person. And then if we put together the two things, we have a new thing that is a hype nowadays. So what is that?
The industrial metaverse. Yeah, so it's hyped pretty much these days. And I mean, the idea really is, well, I think it kind of started from the pandemic, right? So during the pandemic, a lot of manufacturers realized, I'm putting my employees at risk by sending them to the factory floor where they can spread the virus, right? So a lot of companies, manufacturers said, God, wouldn't it be great if I could run my production line remotely, right? I mean, you still need the information workers, you still need the experts that know how to run the production line. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not about replacing them, right? It's about moving them to a safe place, right? Especially during pandemics, right? And of course, there's this angle of efficiency, right? I mean, you might have heard the term lights out factory, because I mean, if you don't have people in your factory, machines don't need the lights on, right? So you can save energy costs, which is a big deal, especially in Europe right now. So that's definitely, there's different motivations. During the pandemic, it was, safety and health. Now with the Ukraine crisis, mainly about energy efficiency and saving energy. But the solution really involves creating a representation of your production line, including the people that work there in some shape or form in a digital realm. And that's what really the industrial metaverse is all about, where you have your digital twins in them, right? So digital twins of your assets, machines, production lines, those kind of things. And then you include the people in that same realm interacting with the digital twins via the use of avatars, basically, digital representations of yourself, right? And you need lots of different pieces of technology to make that work. But in terms of the interactions, I think it can be very beneficial where, obviously people can interact with one another through the use of, video calls and voice calls, voice over IP. But then they can also interact with digital twins using the hopefully standardized interfaces that, things like UPC-UA and other technologies provide, right? And, if you want to make that work, I mean, you really have to figure out what standards you want to use, because every company building their own industrial metaverse is not going to work, right? I mean, I don't know a single manufacturer that would buy that, right? Sure. They just not going to buy it. It needs to be kind of on neutral ground, based on standards, and we all have to kind of interact with one another in a standardized fashion in the industrial metaverse.
Yeah. Andreas, do you think that you now have a cooler job because now you're building the industrial metaverse?
Well, I don't know if it's cooler right now. It gets more fancy anyway. But yeah, I would say the metaverse is one of the upcoming topics. I'm not sure if we have this right now. Of course, we are going in this direction, and we are trying to do digitalization, to get digital twins, and to have the possibility to step away back from the physical world to a control of this world by a more, let's say, virtual world. You can name it a metaverse, of course. But Erich said something really, really important. The metaverse will also rely on standards. And exactly this is one typical statement that is really important for us. Because this is exactly where we are also believe in, that standards, and not only the same communication technology, but also standardized information. So what we are doing with the global production language, to standardize really the different variables from a robot or a machine tool or injection molding machine, so that every customer gets the same information with the same meaning and the same data types, for example, from different manufacturers. And this is really a key, because this is the semantic interoperability that we are trying to enhance the adoption in the manufacturing in the shop floor with the umati initiative. But this is really important for us, that this semantics is really a key to success, because if we just have the same communication architecture, of course we can exchange information, and maybe with this we can have information in the metaverse also. But how can we make sure that the information we are using there is also the same, independent from the manufacturer, with the same meaning, and we don't have to do interpretation on any single variable? This drive us nuts if we would have to do that.
Exactly. That's one issue that Gaia-X is also addressing, or trying to address, right? And with a different approach, in my point of view, which is the top-down approach. So Gaia-X is also concerning about this. I want to switch my supplier, and it should be easy, right? And
yeah, I mean, before we go into Gaia-X, just one other thing that I just want to mention is we have some customers that have built industrial metaverses. They just didn't know that they were building one, right? I mean, they had. I mean, I have one customer that is in the oil and gas industry, and they built for an oil rig, or a collection of oil rigs. Actually, they built an industrial metaverse using UPC-UA. And they have 3D models of the entire oil rig and every machine on the oil rig. And instead of sending, service technicians out on a helicopter, which is super expensive, right? They can just give them a login to their industrial metaverse, and they create avatars for their workers, and they can walk through the oil rig as if they were on site, and they see real time in inverted commas, right? It's not real time. It's not hard real time. It's telemetry in maybe up to a second delay, but relatively quickly they can see the real telemetry from the machine as they're walking through it, right? And they can look at the interactions with other machines and the pipes connecting them and all those things. So it's a great use case of an industrial metaverse where actually being physically present is just too expensive, right? And if you can do it remotely through the use of industrial metaverse technology, you save yourself a lot of money, right? So there are examples where this already exists today.
Yeah, I think this use case is very awesome, but on the other hand, it's very challenging also, because the connectivity in oil rig is not trivial, right?
Well, nowadays it's actually not so much a problem. So when they build usually the oil rig is connected to the shore through a big ass pipe, right? Yeah. And they have fiber optic links going along the pipeline as well for massively fast data connections.
Yeah, in Brazil, in the very far oil rigs, they were using satellite communication. which is not
right.
and not.
Yeah, satellite communication. Well, it's getting better, right? I mean, with things like Starlink, satellite communication is becoming more commodity as well. But I agree that in the old days, satellite communication was also very cost prohibitive.
Yeah. And Erich, in your previous statement, you mentioned lights off factories, and I cannot stop joking about that, because now I think Germany is facing lights off factories, but not because of the Industry 4.0, right?
Yeah, it's actually pretty serious. It's no joking matter here. I mean, there's people seriously concerned about keeping their heating going, never mind rolling blackouts, right? And how to avoid them. So things are pretty grim over here right now. But again, yeah, I mean, as you're moving away from fossil fuels, because initially it was trying to save the planet. Now it's basically because of the Ukraine crisis, right? But I mean, the net result is we got to move to electrification, right? We need to electrify everything, including production, and if you can't produce enough electricity anymore, or produce it not in the way that involves burning fossil fuels, you have a serious problem, and it's going to take a long time to. It's actually not so much the power plants, but the infrastructure, like getting the electricity where you need it, right? So, preferably everybody has their own little wind park attached to their production site, and I have some customers that do that, right? But of course, who's going to pay for it? It's going to take years to build.
Yeah.
All these problems, the biggest challenge in Germany right now is getting planning permission for a wind turbine, right? Because people don't like the noise, they don't like it's an eyesore or whatever. They have all these reasons why they don't want. I mean, it's kind of everybody wants renewable energy, just not where they live, right?
Exactly.
So they kind of it both ways, So really, the best way to produce your electricity is where you need it, right? That's why photovoltaic is so popular, because you can put it right on top of your house without creating an eyesore or making noise. But I mean, that's actually a huge challenge, and we really need to get our shit together and get going, especially in Europe, right?
Yeah. Erich, you said that is not a joke, and just to comment, that's a typical Brazilian behavior. That is, we make jokes out of our disgrace. So
yeah, I know it's a coping mechanism. Yeah, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. But I mean, it's just, I mean, it's so depressing to see the news every evening here in Germany, right?
Yeah.
It's really. I mean, I said to my wife, maybe we should stop watching the news, because it's too depressing. But I mean. Again, it's rough over here right now, right? But as we're very good engineers, and we're going to find solutions. I'm sure of that, right?
Okay, Andreas. Before VDMA, first of all, please explain what is VDMA.
Okay, yeah, VDMA. We are a non-profit association covering, I would say, the needs and requirements and wishes of the mechanical engineering industry from Europe, but we are also active worldwide. So we got more than 3,500 member companies today. So this is a number, 3,500. I think almost every company on the mechanical engineering industry is a member, or even is working somewhere with the VDMA together. Right now we got a history that is about 130 years, I think 128, 29, something like that. So really long tradition, and we started with just a couple of different branches from the mechanical engineering industry, but right now we are covering the whole bunch of different domains, from agricultural up to woodworking. Okay. And this is why we are why we're acting also worldwide, because the needs of the mechanical engineering industry is not just from a European perspective, but it's also important as in the global world that we are bringing these needs and also get requirements with customers from all over the world together under one umbrella. And this exactly is the association VDMA.
Okay, so VDMA is equivalent to ABII in Brazil, right?
I'm not that familiar with ABII. I think it is can be compared. I think ABII is more focusing on just some different branches of the mechanical engineering industry, and is not that wide as we are. But in the end, it is comparable, yes.
Okay, so before VDMA, you have worked at GM, right? And you know very well about production lines, and these production lines are up and running. And these production lines also need to be a data source. Not only new machines, but the current machines need to be a data source. And Umati takes care of that as well, because once is coming from VDMA, it looks like new machinery only. But how is your approach on that? On brownfield instead of greenfield?
Yeah. Well, I would say brownfield might be even more important than greenfield, because in the mechanical engineering industry, but also in process industry, machines are running for decades. So if we want to have a smart manufacturing, or what we also name digital transformation, we have to take care of the existing machines and components and systems. So the UPC-UA technology and also the global production language that is taken into the umati initiative is definitely also addressing brownfield. There are possibilities to get brownfield machines speaking this UPC-UA with the global production language, and we feel that we only reach the goal of a real smart manufacturing if we have a broad usage of this technology and the global production language. Because if we just have some new machines in the factory connected with this interoperability solution, this will not be enough to have, on the one hand, a metaverse, like Erich said, but not even to have real interoperability and get more efficient, because you, as you mentioned, Claudio, you have also see from the customer perspective, and he has a lot of machines that are doing, in the end, a process from A to Z, where the different machines interact on different ways. And you have to cover the whole process in a digital world with interoperabilities and the semantics.
Okay. And Erich, you have seats on many discussions, including umati, IDTA, Digital Twin Consortium, and other Gaia-X, and so on, right? And what's your point of view on all these initiatives? Should we focus in only one of that, or we are wasting energy? Or what's your point of view in so many associations or initiatives taking care of the same, seems to be taking care of the same goal, which is this trying to have a common ground on communication protocols, and seems to be the same vision, but what's the difference, and what are the similarities among these players?
Yeah, so like I mentioned in the beginning, I mean, there's various different digital twins, and you'll find that these consortia usually have different definitions of a digital twin, again, which are all valid. They just, they look at the physical asset from a different angle, right? From a different use case, from a different, problem to be solved. There's also regional differences. So some, consortia are focused, in the Americas. Some consortiums are focused mainly in Europe. And what I've tried to do quite a lot is create liaisons, right? So we say, hey, please, for the love of God, talk to these other folks over there, because there is overlap. right? And wouldn't it be great if you could leverage the work of others rather than building yet another solution, right? And quite frankly, in 99% of the cases, they're glad and they're happy to use the existing stuff. It's not about reinventing the wheel. That happens too. Don't get me wrong. That happens too, and it's sad and it's a waste of time, right? But in most cases, they're actually more than happy to reach out, and a lot of times they just weren't aware that it already exists, or somebody else is already working on it. And then by creating these liaisons, you get critical mass, right? Then all of a sudden, your initiative is not just Europe-wide, but it's worldwide, right? Because the folks in Japan and the folks in the US are also, or in the Americas, let's say, I don't want to, too US focused, in the Americas also leverage it, right? And then you get, like-minded people working together, and that's really what you want to achieve, right? Where, and maybe you've forgotten something. A lot of times when you start collaborating with somebody, they'll say, "Have you considered this?" And you go, "Oh shit, no, I haven't." Well, thanks for calling that out, and thanks for bringing different perspective to the table, and you make a better solution, right? Which is more rounded, which covers more use cases, or whatever, right? And then another aspect is that a lot of these consortia have different verticals and focus, right? So, Platform Industry 4.0 is manufacturing focused. Folks like the Industrial Internet Consortium, they have 5 or 6 verticals that they're looking at. Manufacturing is one of them. And yes, there's overlap, right? The manufacturing vertical. And then you just have to sit down together and say, hey, you have a reference architecture, we have a reference architecture. Do they fit together? And can we make them fit together, right? And at the minimum, then you should really create some sort of description, white paper, explanation for the people that don't spend all their time in these consortia to figure that out, right? To basically say, okay, well, if I'm going to use the reference architecture from the Platform Industry 4.0, does it mean that, people that are using the reference architecture from the Industrial Internet Consortium are not going to be able to work with me? Well, that would be bad, right? So, then as the experts, you need to sit down and say, okay, how does this fit together, right? And again, a digital twin, like I mentioned at the beginning, can have multiple definitions, and it doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It's just more than likely solving different use cases. I mean, I'm not going to load an UPC-UA model into 3D Studio Max. I need a wireframe model for that, right? So you need to basically get the right tool for the job, and by collaborating through these liaisons in these different consortia, you can see how it all fits together. And we're doing that in Germany. For example, Automation ML, the OPC Foundation, the VDMA, the IDTA, Platform Industry 4.0, we're all sitting together and figuring this out, and creating a cookbook, a recipe for the small to medium-sized manufacturers to figure this out, because they don't have the time or the money to do it for us, right?
I'm looking forward to reading this, because
me too.
That's a huge challenge. This is something that we discuss every week in Brazil. That is, the people normally they say what they do, but they don't talk about the other association and the similarities, or the how they can make each other better. It's like I'm talking to myself only, right? And does not acknowledge the other association and benefits of the other, right? Or the consortium, not the association.
Yeah, and that's a real problem, and it's usually laziness, or in some cases ignorance, right? And that really needs to be stopped. Well, I wouldn't go as far as saying evil is maybe ego plays into it sometimes.
No, I said ego. I said ego.
Oh, you did say ego. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So then ego, we're on the same page. Sometimes ego plays into it for sure. But I mean, the worst thing you can possibly do is create something in the realm of, let's say, digital twin and not look left or right.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing you can do, because you will fail, guaranteed, right?
Yeah.
Guaranteed. And, so if you want to succeed, you must collaborate, and you must be able to say, how does it fit into the big picture, right? If you can't do collaboration and you can't answer the question, how does it fit into the big picture, you will fail.
Andreas, I will put you in a hard situation now. And remember that you are not talking about as VDMA. You are talking as Andreas. When we talk about umati or UPC-UA, looks a very engineering thing, right? It's about technical stuff. But is there a geopolitical interest on that? Isn't hard to talk about cooperation in such days?
Is it hard to talk about corporations? I would go even one step further. Erich said something really important. You have to look left and right. One example about that is, for example, Sesame. Cooperation with Sesame for America is for us pretty important, because they got a cloud library where they put together semantics from all over the world, and we directly cooperated with them to get also our semantics on there. So I would totally agree that one of the most important things is to collaborate. Also for me as a person, and I'm, as you mentioned, Claudio, not talking for the VDMA, but for me as a person, I really believe that we have to collaborate. We are collaborating with the OPC Foundation as they are doing the technology, so we didn't do an own technology for our semantics. We take OPC-UA. We collaborate with Sesame to bring our semantics to North America because they have their networks there. And we are also, for example, open to collaborate with ABII. I don't know if there are discussions right now, because there we got somebody in Sao Paulo, Thomas Ulbrich, who's at the VDMA office there. And I think he's also talking to ABII, because we only have success really if we have in global semantic and global big picture on the topic interoperability. And I step back a little bit to the VDMA perspective, because there something pretty new happened. Well, right now it's about 1 year ago, where we founded a new department called Machine Information Interoperability. And this is exactly the step done by VDMA to give the big picture on interoperability really the importance that it has. Because with this department, we're exactly doing this interoperability big picture, and we're taking everything into account, if it's E-class or MTP or OPC-UA or asset administration shell, or I don't know what's on the agenda there. It's really pretty much. But this is exactly why we believe that interoperability and the big picture is one of the most important keys to success for the future manufacturing.
Talking about big picture, Erich, we have mentioned but not talking about the Gaia-X. Can you explain what is Gaia-X in your point of view, and why do you need Gaia-X or not?
Sure. So Gaia-X is an initiative started by the German government. It's now a European initiative to create a sovereign data space, they're calling it. So basically, kind of started off for kind of government workloads, where they said we need to be in full control of our data, because it's highly it's personal data, it's political data. We can't have that data stored outside of the country, right? So we want to create a data space for initially within Germany, now within Europe. To create means for governments, but also normal people, companies, accessing the data in a secure way or using standard interfaces, but the data remains in country, right? And sovereign. And do we need it? I think yes, we need it. We need it for some, like I say, for some particular use cases. So so there's a spin-off called Cortina-X, which is focused on the automotive industry. There's going to be another new spin-off now called Manufacturing-X, focused on the manufacturing industry. Do I personally need it? I probably don't personally need it. I could see some of our customers at Microsoft needing it, right? In a way, we've already built at least the technology required. So as long as they don't reinvent the wheel and leverage existing standards like UPC-UA, like the information models from the VDMA, I don't see a problem, right? Then it just becomes one more solution, right? But my concern is that it's gonna it's gonna take a long time for sure, but that's okay. It's okay to take a long time. We just have to be patient. But my bigger concern is that they go off on tangents. So we need to keep a close eye. We need to collaborate. We need to educate to make sure that it, especially Manufacturing X doesn't go off into outer space, right?
Erich, if you allow me, the point that Gaia-X is very important for me is that we have lack of confidence on personal data, right? Worldwide, I would say. And this is bringing a lot of issues for people like you and me. And I think Gaia-X is important to make sure that this thing that is happening in the personal perspective does not happen in the company perspective. Right? Because this lack of governance on data is something very bad for a person, but for a company is even worse, don't you think?
Well, there's always personal data. I think there's no lack of personal data. There's only lack of security for personal data, right? So I think part of the problems that we need to solve can be solved without requiring Gaia-X, right? And some of the technology that I've come across to implement Gaia-X doesn't make it better, in my opinion, right? So this idea of connecting all these smaller cloud providers together to create one big, data space is difficult, because the hacker, the bad guy, right, is just going to pick the weakest link. They always pick the weakest link, right? They're not going to try to break in through the front door, right? So creating this network of smaller cloud providers will really require all of them to have a minimum security standard, right? And if that can't be achieved, then Gaia-X will fail, because again, the hacker, the bad guy, always picks the weakest link and gets in through there, right? So from that perspective, it's difficult, right? I know that Microsoft and other cloud providers, large cloud providers are the same, are spending literally billions on cloud security every year, right? So, if you're going to do this right, you'll have to spend billions. And I'm not sure if the small to medium-sized cloud providers will be able to do that, right?
Exactly.
And that's my biggest concern. So, yes, the problem exists. I'm not sure if Gaia-X is the solution to the problem, right? I think the best way to describe it. We'll have to see, right, if we can pull it off. We're actively working with the Gaia-X initiative and creating solutions, right? So it's but it's a difficult problem to solve, right? It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time, and it's going to first and foremost take a lot of money and investment to get right.
Andreas, do you think that this data in a physical space or physical place, like in a country, is a concern for those who are making machines or those who have industrial assets? Do you think that this is a real concern, or is just a myth?
Well, I think the machine builders, they all have a kind of a treasury box, let's say it like that. So information that they don't want to share with anybody because this is their knowledge, their know-how. They're really historically billion worth information. And this treasury box has to be secured. And this information they don't want to share. Sometimes there are use cases you have to share part of that because otherwise you couldn't do the process and do the production. For example, if you want to manufacture a kind of a textile that is really fancy and really hard to do, then the machine has to have parameters and variables that is really precisely for this textile and so on. So there is a kind of customer machine builder relation that is really trustful because both have to agree to do this textile and nobody lets get the information how the process to do this how this process is. So the concern of security or to not share all the information is really important, and a lot of machine builders have that. But on the other hand, the exchange of information along the whole value chain is also really important because we all learned, and this is again where semantics comes into the play. We all learned that information exchange along the whole value chain gives us the possibility to be more efficient, to reach potentials that we already saw but never could reach. So it is both. It is protecting your treasury information and it's sharing those information that makes everybody, you yourself and also the value chain, makes more efficient and better, and together get a better impact on the market.
Yeah. I need to add that I think many machine builders think they have a treasure box, but in fact they have just a data source. And you need to add intelligence to this data source in order to have a real value. So I think this is my personal point of view. There is a lack of understanding of the difference between data and information. And I think the machine builders, because of their history, they come from the mechanics, they come from the electrical part, not from the data science, right? So I think this is something that can be explored. What I say here is that when we mix this information from machine builders with those who provide services, right, we have a huge increase on value, right? So I think there is still a lack of opportunity. There is a huge opportunity here. That's my point.
Yeah, I would add as well. I mean, from my perspective, it really depends on the use case and the size of the manufacturer or the machine builder. I mean, if you're an international manufacturer or machine builder, you really want to store the data where it's either cheapest or where there are legal requirements to store it there, right? But I yet have to come across a manufacturer or a machine builder that says all my data must reside in country X, right? That doesn't exist, right? I mean, there are either legal requirements or they say, it's cheaper over here than there, that's why I want to store it there, right? But the real, I think the real discussion is, or used to be, at least, storing the data on-prem or in the cloud, right? Once they made the move to the cloud, they just want to store it wherever it's cheapest, right?
I'm seeing something different. That is, it should be in Europe, right? It should be in Europe. So that's the requirement. I'm listening, right?
Yeah.
Even reading.
That might be so, and there might be legal requirements to say that it must be in Europe, and that's fine. But I've also come. I mean, the large international manufacturers, quite frankly, they don't care, right? In my personal experience, right?
Okay.
But so anyway, it's we'll see. I mean, again, you have to cater for both, right? You got to offer data storage as cost effective as possible, and you got to offer to store it wherever the customer wants it to be stored, right? So that's definitely the case. So that's why it's so hard to be successful in the cloud space, because you really have to have data centers all over the world, right?
Yeah. And now a very broad question. And Erich, how is the digitalization of the German economy going in your point of view?
Well, I think, quite frankly, it's going pretty well in comparison to other countries. Of course, I would like it to go much faster, but that's just the way it is. If you look at some of the key industries in Europe, right? So you have obviously automotive, right? Aviation, chemical industry is pretty big in Europe. So if you look at those, I mean, they've been digitizing for 30 years, right? I mean, they know how it's done, and they've done it, especially when a particular sector is getting disrupted from the outside. Like, the automotive industry got massively disrupted because of the move towards electric vehicles, right? And people
mobility as a service too.
Mobility as a service. I was just going to say, the people in the younger generations don't really see the value of car ownership anymore, right? So things need to change, right? And needed to change, and that was a great example where disruption fuels digitization, right? And I could say the same thing about the chemical industry, and then of course oil and gas and the energy sector is totally getting disrupted right now, right? So obviously great momentum there. Some of the more traditional machine builders and the small to medium-sized machine builders are lagging behind, not because they don't want to get digitized, just because they don't have the money, right? They don't have the money or the resources basically to do it, right? And they're a bit slower, of course. It's going to happen, right? I mean, it's going to happen, and we're going to see it more and more. And again, it depends on how much money you're willing to spend on it. But the most important thing is to be motivated because your customers are asking you to, right? And then do that, and do just that, where you really have the ability to get real value out of it because the customer is paying for it. Don't digitize for the sake of it, right?
No. Andreas, you represent a lot of an institution which is quite connected to the small and medium business, right? The Mittelstand. And how is the digitalization in these companies in your point of view?
Well, there is not the one answer, because it really depends on the company. We see that the topic of digital transformation and digitalization is in the mind of, I would say, all the different manufacturers. So also small and medium-sized enterprises know that digitalization, smart manufacturing is a topic, and they want to go in the direction. And I would also say they do. By they always do in their own pace. So if you don't have 20 people covering the knowledge and also the time and resources to do research and to bring them to digital transformation. Well, this is a fact you have to respect. And then on the one hand, you can do your pace, your things, and Erich said it really, really well. Take the customer need in the center of your activities, and maybe also important, do checking on the market. So what are your competitors doing? Have they lessons learned? Have they, I don't know, best practices? And this is also where we as an association are trying to help, because we bring the different small and medium-sized enterprises, but also the large manufacturers together and let them discuss about smart manufacturing, about artificial intelligence, about, I don't know, semantics, and everything that plays somehow a role in the digital transformation. And I think this is one of the major values of an association like VDMA, why we are also gaining so many new members.
Makes sense. And Andreas, last question for you. How do you think that the Brazilian companies can cooperate and also can benefit from umati?
Oh, this is a good question. I wouldn't say I waited for that, but I'm happy that you do the question. So I think semantics, interoperability, the possibility to exchange information with a standardized technology and with standardized variables and their meanings is something that is on a global scale. So the benefits of it, getting more efficient, reduce the cost of reinventing interfaces, and have the possibility to easier and more efficient use information from the shop floor. This is also something that 100% applies to Brazilian companies as well as all companies from all over the world. And if I put that to umati, it gets pretty easy, because umati is also a global initiative. Every company, and also not only the manufacturers, but also software companies or users and whoever is somewhere involved in the whole shop floor information exchange, can get a partner of umati. So with this umati partnership, also the Brazilian companies have the possibility to join this initiative to discuss with companies from all over the world facing the need of having standardized semantics of the shop floor. So I totally invite other companies in Brazil, but also everywhere else in the world, to join this initiative, to look at the technology on the UPC-UA and on the companion specification that we name Global Production Language, do implementation, discuss on best practices, on lessons learned, enjoy this, I would say, movement, worldwide movement, to the next level of interoperability regarding the shop floor.
Andreas, I totally agree with you, and I'm encouraging companies to look at that. Otherwise, everybody is going to produce, to develop a wheel, and this is a waste of energy and time, right?
Yeah, exactly. And maybe just one thing to add. This is all based on open source technology. So it's not like the VDMA or umati is gaining any money out of that. We really do that because we think that the companies all over the world have really a benefit of that. And this is why we also choose this open source approach, that we don't want to lock them in a specific ecosystem or something like that. We really want to make it as easy as possible to be part of this interoperability and umati initiative.
Great. Erich, from your perspective, what opportunities you see for Brazilian companies?
So, really the opportunities are the same all over the world. You can use things like digital twins and standard interfaces for digital twins like UPC-UA, and then the information models like the UPC-UA data models and information models that Andreas just mentioned, you can use them as a tool to get the job done. Now, what job that is, you need to discuss with your customers. But it's clear that digital interfaces and digital data will help you create new products or products that are companion to the products that you're already selling, right? Adding additional value. What that is, you really need to figure out yourself, right? But see digital twins and the digital information models that are in those digital twins as a tool to do something that you couldn't do before. And as long as you see it that way, and not a means to an end or a mean in its own right, you can avoid, pilot purgatory, which is something that is especially common in the industrial space, where you just do lots of proof of concepts and you never get past those, and you never get to a place where you actually sell a product based on it. You can avoid that by including your customer in the conversation, right? And saying, would you pay for this? Would it solve a problem for you? And I think that's the key, and that's definitely what I would say to Brazilian companies if they'd ask me, is to leverage the tools, but talk to your customer about what you're going to use the tools for.
Andreas.
Yeah, well, Erich, you already said it. Try to get the customer involved. I think this is, I think this is really important for the user perspective, because this is also what we try to figure out. What is the need of the customers when it comes to the semantic? This is why we have, for example, an automotive user group joining the activities, and I think those more than 600 companies that are joining forces to do the semantics, it's not just the machine builders, it's also users, software companies, and also cloud companies like, for example, Microsoft is joining those activities. And this is why we think that you have to figure out the different needs from the different perspectives, not only from the customer, where this is focusing, of course, but also from your vendors and partners, because maybe they have also some added value that you didn't think of. So collaboration, again, not only on the association level, as we had in our discussion here before, also on customer and company level, also from the competitive perspective, is really, really important.
That's awesome. Erich, your final words, please.
Well, it was very interesting to have this discussion. I think we've realized that there's a big collection of initiatives out there. I think Brazilian manufacturers have the choice to look for technology that will help them save money and solve problems. I definitely recommend the work done in the VDMA on UPC-UA information models and industrial digital twins that can be used for the industrial metaverse. In the Americas, specifically in the US, SESMI has already adopted the work that the VDMA is doing. Maybe a similar initiative in Brazil should do that too, right? And then, like I mentioned before, don't forget the customer in your digital transformation journey.
Wonderful hint. Andreas, your last word?
Well, I think my last word is just do collaboration. Don't reinvent the wheel. Check what's out there. And don't be shy to address those associations or, parties that are doing something. From my perspective, they are open to collaborate. I never got, I would say, a problem to collaborate with one of them, because they are also open to collaborate and they also see the benefit of collaboration on a global scale. So just do it. Don't think twice. Do collaboration. Look for best practices. Look for technologies that are out there, and really don't reinvent the wheel. This will just cost you time and money.
Okay, it was so nice to talk to you, Erich and Andreas. And I see you guys in the next episode of Pub 4.0 ou Boteco 4.0. Abraço.
Você acompanhou o Boteco 4.0, uma produção da ABII e da Ocotea Filmes. Fique de olho nas nossas redes sociais e não perca nenhum episódio dessa aventura.